Beauty fades, but the pain behind it often lingers far longer than the fame ever did. These stars once lit up the screen with charm and glamour, but behind their glow were stories of hardship, neglect, illness, and impossible standards. Their reflections dimmed not from time alone, but from the weight of expectation, exploitation, and sorrow. Here are 21 vintage stars who lost their beauty in the most tragic ways possible. Montgomery Clif. Montgomery Clif was once a breathtakingly handsome leading man, but a 1956 car crash forever altered his face and life. The near-fatal accident left Clif with a broken jaw, nose, and facial fractures, requiring extensive plastic surgery. Though he returned to acting, he lived in chronic pain and fell into alcohol and pill addiction to cope. Audiences noticed the drastic change. The matinee idol's face, once so beautiful and expressive, became visibly scarred and anguished. His post-accident films drew curious crowds eager to see the before and after Clif on screen. Tragically, the combination of his disfigurement and substance abuse led to a rapid physical decline. By the early 1960s, Clif's features had grown gaunt and weary, a shadow of his former glory. He died in 1966 at just 45, his once radiant beauty lost to injury and addiction. Clif's downfall, often called the longest suicide in Hollywood, remains one of the industry's saddest cautionary tales. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's wholesome beauty and vitality in The Wizard of Oz gave way to a heartbreaking decline driven by decades of studio pressures and drug dependency. Fed amphetamines as a teen star to keep her weight down and energy up, Garland developed addictions that wrecked her health. By middle age, the toll of alcoholism, pills, and insomnia was painfully evident in her appearance. Friends noted that Judy looked far older than her years. At 47, she could pass for 70, her face etched with fatigue. Her once bright eyes grew puffy, and her figure fluctuated between gaunt and bloated as she cycled through crash diets and breakdowns. A Los Angeles Times tribute described her tragic journey from beloved teenage star to physically and mentally ravaged addict. Indeed, by the end, Garland was frail, with thinning hair and a tremor, the spark of her youthful beauty dimmed by years of abuse. She died of an overdose in 1969, leaving the world to mourn not only her talent, but the premature loss of her natural radiance to self-destructive demons. Veronica Lake. In the early 1940s, Veronica Lake was the ultimate blonde bombshell, famous for her seductive peekaboo hair and ethereal beauty. 3 decades later, heavy drinking and hard living had robbed her of that allure in a devastating way. By 1970, a reporter who met Lake was shocked by her condition. The former femme fatale looked like a cleaning lady, dressed dowdily, face deeply lined, and demeanor broken. Years of severe alcoholism had wrecked her once smooth complexion and figure. One acquaintance noted that, at only 47, Lake appeared to be in her 70s. She had also struggled with untreated schizophrenia and destitution, which compounded her physical decline. Lake spent her final years in obscurity, working as a waitress and living in cheap hotels. When she died in 1973 of hepatitis, she was bloated and almost unrecognizable from her Hollywood heyday. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton's beauty was so striking in the late 1940s that she quickly rose from bit parts to leading roles. But by 1967, she died at age 39, looking decades older, her looks and life ravaged by addiction and vice. Payton infamously descended into alcoholism and drug abuse in the 1950s after a series of scandals. The once luscious blonde gradually lost her fresh face, alcohol bloat set in, her teeth went bad, and she gained weight. By 1960, her finances and beauty were in shambles. The film threat biography of Payton notes that out-of-control alcoholism ruined her beauty and finances, and she was soon destitute, even resorting to prostitution to survive. On Skid Row, few recognized the former starlet with the puffy, careworn face and hard eyes. She endured beatings and arrests, the physical toll evident in every mugshot. Payton's tragic final chapter saw her living with her parents, liver failing, face deeply lined and hair thinned. As one writer put it, few falls from grace have matched the severity of Barbara Payton's decline from glory of a Warner Brothers contract to life as a Skid Row prostitute, a physical and spiritual collapse of epic proportions. Helen Lamar. Helen Lamar was hailed in the 1940s as the most beautiful woman in the world, with her flawless face and glamorous allure. Tragically, in her later decades, Lamar became obsessed with preserving her looks and underwent one cosmetic surgery after another until she no longer looked like herself. By the 1970s, excessive facelifts and experimental procedures had altered Hetty's features so much that the mirror reflected a stranger. The surgeries left her skin taut and mask-like, erasing the natural grace that once enchanted millions. Embittered by aging, Lamar withdrew from public view entirely. According to her children, she lived reclusively, communicating only by phone as she couldn't bear anyone to see her altered appearance. One biographer noted she tried to recapture the past with increasingly excessive plastic surgery and became a sad punchline to those who once worshipped her beauty. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth's face, with its flowing red hair and captivating smile, defined 1940s glamour. But by the late 1950s, years of alcohol abuse had ravaged the beauty of her younger years and aged her considerably. Colleagues were startled to see the once youthful Hayworth looking far older than 38, her skin coarsened and eyes dulled. She began forgetting lines on set, an early sign of Alzheimer's disease that would later be diagnosed. As her condition worsened in the 1970s, Hayworth often appeared disoriented and physically frail in public, a shadow of her vibrant self. She became rail-thin, and her famous face grew gaunt. Many assumed her confusion was just severe alcoholism, not realizing the underlying illness. Hayworth's daughter described how the combination of years of drinking and dementia stole her mother's regal beauty. In her final public appearance in 1981, Rita's once sparkling eyes were vacant, her posture bent, needing assistance to walk. She lived her last years cared for by family, rarely seen by outsiders. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was never the typical young starlet, but in her prime she had a unique charm and unforgettable eyes that made her stand out. Near the end of her life, however, a series of major health crises dramatically altered her appearance. In 1983, at age 75, Davis survived breast cancer surgery, only to suffer multiple strokes days later. The strokes left her face partially paralyzed and her body terribly frail. Friends were alarmed to find the once formidable actress weighing under 100 pounds. One side of her face drooped, freezing her iconic eyes in an asymmetric stare. Stacker magazine notes that the strokes caused slurred speech and paralysis on one side of her face and her left arm. Never one to give up easily, Davis heroically relearned to speak and continued giving interviews, but she was painfully aware of her changed looks. She joked darkly that she had faces in the past, but no face left after the illness. In public appearances like the 1987 Oscars, Davis appeared in a wheelchair, her tiny frame swallowed in elegant gowns, her once expressive face now stiff and mask-like. Errol Flynn? Errol Flynn's fall from an icon to a bloated, weary figure by his 40s remains one of Hollywood's starkest cautionary tales. In the 1930s, Flynn's chiseled looks and athletic charm made him the embodiment of screen masculinity. But behind the scenes, he lived recklessly. Years of heavy drinking, reportedly up to 2 quarts of vodka a day, and wild partying aged him rapidly. By 1958, a reporter described the 49-year-old actor as bloated and gray. His once sparkling eyes turned bloodshot, his trim frame gave way to a paunch, and photos show a man looking decades older. A West Hollywood history profile noted that by his early 40s, drinking had already taken a toll. Roles dried up, and studios offered only parts that mocked his decline. Flynn died of heart failure in 1959 at just 50. An autopsy revealed the body of a much older man. He once joked that he made more money playing a shadow of his former self. But there was no humor in the truth. Errol Flynn's downfall showed how beauty, when abused by excess, can vanish long before life itself does. Marlon Brando. Few leading men have ever been as jaw-droppingly gorgeous in youth, or as shockingly transformed in old age as Marlon Brando. In the 1950s, Brando's chiseled features and muscled physique in A Streetcar Named Desire set a new standard for male beauty. Fast forward to the 1980s, and Brando was virtually unrecognizable, morbidly obese, reclusive, and in ill health. By age 80, he was a hulk, a wreck of obesity and self-indulgence, a hideously fat man. He who once had been so beautiful, he altered our idea of maleness. Over the years, Brando indulged in massive quantities of food. His voracious appetite led him to reportedly weigh over 300 pounds. His face grew puffed and heavy-lidded, erasing the electric magnetism it once held. He also became increasingly disheveled. In later interviews, Brando would appear in caftans or muumuus, seemingly indifferent to his looks. Health problems like diabetes and cardiac issues compounded his deterioration. Brando himself wryly acknowledged his downfall, referring to himself as a fat man who had eaten his way out of Hollywood's good graces. His death in 2004 marked the end of an era and served as a poignant reminder of how dramatically nature and neglect can change even the most stunning physical specimen. Rock Hudson. Tall, dark, and impossibly handsome, Rock Hudson was the epitome of the strapping Hollywood leading man throughout the 1950s and 60s. But in the mid-1980s, an unexpected and then mysterious illness, AIDS, tragically robbed Hudson of his robust good looks in a matter of months. In July 1985, the world was shocked when a gaunt, frail Hudson appeared at a press event with Doris Day. The man who had once cut such a figure of health now had sunken cheeks, ashen skin, and needed help standing. He publicly confirmed his AIDS diagnosis soon after, becoming the first major celebrity face of the disease. Sadly, that face was a heartbreaking sight. The Los Angeles Times recounted how reporters were shocked by his gaunt appearance and how the footage of the visibly ill Hudson became an essential part of America's understanding of AIDS. In the following weeks, Hudson's condition deteriorated rapidly. Friends who visited noted he had wasted away, losing over 50 pounds, and that he looked decades older due to the illness's ravages. His once broad shoulders were skeletal, and his voice weak. He barely resembled the vigorous heartthrob audiences adored in films like Pillow Talk. Hudson died in October 1985 at age 59, his beauty and life cut short by a then unstoppable virus. Orson Wells. Orson Wells is a case where genius and excess went hand in hand, and sadly, the excess overtook his physical form. In his Citizen Kane days, Wells was solidly built but dapper, with a commanding presence. By his late 40s, however, Wells had succumbed to overeating on an epic scale. By the end of the 1950s, Orson Wells was perilously fat, as one biographer put it, reportedly weighing around 350 pounds at times. He famously joked, "My doctor told me to stop having intimate dinners for 4 unless there are 3 other people." In truth, Wells's prodigious meals, entire chickens, mounds of foie gras, and bottles of whiskey, led to such massive weight gain that it caused him physical pain to be reminded of it. Photos from his later life show Wells with an enormous girth and bloated face, almost a different person from the trim wunderkind who made Kane. His appearances on talk shows in the 1970s featured him wheezing and mopping sweat, his health clearly suffering. Colleagues described how it became difficult for Wells to move around the set due to his size. He resorted to wearing billowing black caftans to hide his body. Ever the showman, Wells would still project confidence, but privately he battled heart problems and diabetes. Elizabeth Taylor. Arguably the most stunning child-turned-adult star in Hollywood history, Elizabeth Taylor faced highly publicized ups and downs in her appearance over the years. In her youth, Taylor's violet eyes and flawless face were the gold standard. But from the 1970s onward, severe health problems and addictions resulted in a very different Elizabeth at times. During her marriage to Senator John Warner in the late 70s, Taylor became noticeably heavy. She did get fat, one account noted bluntly. Worse, a litany of illnesses struck: broken back 5 times, 2 hip replacements, a brain tumor, skin cancer, and ultimately congestive heart failure. Each ordeal left its mark. By the 1980s, tabloids printed unflattering photos of Taylor looking puffy-faced or wheelchair-bound, sparking cruel headlines. By the time of her passing in 2011 at 79, Taylor had endured more physical trials than almost anyone, and her once-eternal beauty had been repeatedly tested. Still, her indomitable spirit shone through those trials, even as her outward appearance bore the scars of a lifetime of both glory and pain. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner's beauty was so legendary that she was dubbed the world's most beautiful animal in her prime. But in the 1980s, a debilitating stroke and years of smoking left the screen siren tragically altered. By her mid-60s, Ava's health had deteriorated badly. In 1986, she suffered 2 strokes that partially paralyzed her left side and froze half her face in a sad rictus. For a woman whose allure was her livelihood, this was a cruel blow. One visitor described that it would have been a hard blow to bear for any woman, but for an actress once hailed as the world's most beautiful, it was a tragedy. Ava's once voluptuous figure grew frail. She needed a wheelchair and constant oxygen due to emphysema from decades of cigarettes. Friends like Gregory Peck were heartbroken to see Ava's face, formerly so expressive and vivacious, now slack on one side and etched with sorrow. In conversations, she remained witty and blunt about her situation. As if getting old wasn't tough enough, she quipped without self-pity, but privately it was clear she struggled with losing her looks and independence. By 1988, nearly broke and homebound in London, Gardner rarely went out, avoiding old acquaintances who might be startled by her condition. She passed away in 1990 at age 67. Vivien Lee. Vivien Lee will forever be remembered as the delicate yet fiery Scarlett O'Hara, but few realized that behind her incandescent beauty lay chronic illness that would tragically wither her. Lee struggled for years with bipolar disorder and tuberculosis, both of which took a toll on her body. In her 40s, Vivien's mental state led to erratic behavior and periods in asylums where she underwent grueling shock treatments. These treatments, by her own later account, damaged her memory and left her in a haze. She received 27 shock treatments, destroying portions of her memory. Friends noticed that the once flawless Lee began to show strain. She lost weight to the point of frailty, her cheeks hollowing. The recurrence of tuberculosis in the 1960s further sapped her strength. By 1967, the 53-year-old Lee was described in press reports as tiny and frail, weighing barely 100 pounds. Her skin, once so luminous on Technicolor film, grew pale and drawn from illness. She still smoked heavily, exacerbating her condition. In her final stage performances, colleagues were alarmed by how fragile she appeared, sometimes coughing up blood off stage. Lee passed away in 1967 after a severe TB bout, essentially dying in her bedroom after collapsing. The London theater world dimmed its lights in her honor, but in truth, Vivien's own light had been dimming physically for years. While she remained beautiful to the end in an ethereal way, the vibrant bloom of her youth had long been blighted by disease and anguish. Tula Bankhead. Tula Bankhead was once the life of every party, a magnetic stage actress with piercing eyes and a sultry voice. But her notorious devotion to cigarettes, cocktails, and all-night carousing eventually destroyed not just her voice, but her vitality and looks. By the 1960s, Tula's hard-living lifestyle had left her extremely emaciated and sick. The woman who in youth radiated naughty charm had become a trembling, raspy-voiced wraith. Bankhead's decades of chain-smoking and drinking led to chronic emphysema, malnutrition, and pneumonia. In fact, she was hospitalized multiple times for respiratory ailments. Near the end of her life, friends barely recognized the 5'3" actress who now weighed under 70 pounds and had to wear wigs to mask hair loss. Her once striking eyes were often bloodshot, and her skin prematurely wrinkled. In 1968, at only 66, Tula succumbed to double pneumonia, complicated by her weakened state. Doctors listed emphysema due to cigarette smoking, malnutrition, and possibly a strain of the flu among the factors. The woman who had personified hedonistic glamour in the Roaring '20s died basically of self-inflicted physical ruin. Ever defiant, Bankhead quipped, "Cocaine isn't habit-forming, I should know, I've been using it for years." But in the end, all her vices caught up with her. She spent her final weeks bedridden in a hospital, a far cry from the vibrant Tula of legend. When she passed, theater marquees dimmed, and perhaps it was merciful. The world remembered the bold, glamorous Bankhead, not the tragic figure of her final days ravaged by a lifetime of excess. Linda Darnell. Sometimes beauty vanishes not with age, but in a single, horrifying moment. Linda Darnell, a Hollywood star of the 1940s, was celebrated for her flawless face and charm. In 1965, she was trapped in a house fire at a friend's home. She suffered third-degree burns over 80% of her body. Once hailed as one of the great natural beauties, Darnell was left unrecognizable. Firefighters who rescued her were stunned by the extent of her injuries. She survived for 33 hours in the hospital, bandaged head to toe before passing away. Reports, later disputed, claim she ran back inside to save a child, a final act of bravery. Regardless of the truth, the tragedy marked a brutal end for a luminous star. Linda Darnell's legacy became one of striking contrast, radiant on screen and cruelly disfigured in death. Her story is a haunting reminder of how suddenly life and beauty can vanish. Jean Tierney. Jean Tierney, with her heart-shaped face and emerald eyes, was a star of the 1940s, best known for Laura. But by the next decade, her beauty faded under the weight of mental illness. Guilt over her daughter's disabilities plunged her into severe depression. She endured 27 electroshock treatments that ravaged her memory and clarity. Tierney withdrew from films, and the medication she was prescribed altered her appearance, causing weight gain and a puffy, fatigued face. Public sightings in the mid-1950s shocked fans. One columnist cruelly remarked that she was aging fast, unaware of her internal battles. Though she returned briefly to the screen in 1964's The Pleasure Seekers, Tierney retired soon after. She later spoke out against shock therapy, believing it had erased years of her life. Her decline revealed how even luminous stars could be dimmed by invisible pain. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was the face of the Roaring Twenties, a vivacious redhead in Hollywood's first it girl. But by the time she died in 1965, her appearance and spirit were almost unrecognizable. She retired from film in 1933 at just 28, and her life descended into isolation. Likely suffering from schizophrenia, the same illness that plagued her mother, Bow endured repeated breakdowns and institutionalizations. Physically, she changed dramatically. Once slim and radiant, she gained weight and began neglecting her appearance. In photos from the 1950s, she appears in house dresses with disheveled hair, far from the sparkling flapper she once was. Bow spent her final years as a recluse in Culver City, rarely seen or visited. She died alone of a heart attack at 60 while watching an old Gary Cooper Western. Clara Bow's downfall was not from obscurity alone, but from the silence of mental illness. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich, the smoky-voiced siren of the 1930s, clung fiercely to her glamour. She remained stylish into her 60s, her cheekbones sharpened by lighting and couture. But by the 1970s, things changed. A stage fall left her with a broken leg, and arthritis and alcohol began to erode her health. Determined not to be seen in decline, she vanished from public life. After 1979, she never appeared in public again. In her Paris apartment, she refused even close friends, communicating only by phone. Reporters tried to catch a glimpse. Some even used cranes, but few succeeded. Those who did said she was pale and bloated from medication, her once dazzling features barely visible. In her solitude, Dietrich drank heavily to cope. When she died in 1992 at age 90, the world remembered not her frailty, but the stylish icon she had once been. Susan Peters. Susan Peters was poised for stardom in the early 1940s, her delicate beauty earning her an Oscar nomination. But in 1945, a hunting accident changed everything. A stray bullet lodged in her spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down at just 23. From glamorous gowns to life in a wheelchair, the transformation was swift and devastating. She courageously continued acting, even starring in the 1951 TV drama Miss Susan. But the pain never left her. Her once vibrant face grew thin and drawn. Her health worsened by complications from paralysis. Privately, Peters struggled with depression and isolation. She died in 1952 at 31 from kidney failure and pneumonia. A Los Angeles Times obituary captured the heartbreak best. Her accident virtually ended her career. Susan Peters became a symbol of beauty interrupted by fate's cruel hand. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's sharp cheekbones and fierce glamour defined classic Hollywood. But in her later years, that iconic image began to slip, and Crawford couldn't bear it. Though she maintained her looks into her 60s with surgery and strict grooming, by the early 1970s, her health declined. Dental issues, ulcers, and visible facial lines left her feeling exposed. In 1974, after a charity event, unflattering photos appeared in the press. Horrified, Crawford declared, "If that's how I look, they'll never see me again." She meant it. From that point on, she lived as a recluse in her New York apartment, refusing even close friends like Katharine Hepburn. Neighbors occasionally glimpsed her walking in twilight, scarf-clad and gaunt. When she died of a heart attack in 1977, there were no recent public images, only the enduring memory of a screen goddess in her prime. Thank you for watching. If this journey through Hollywood's more haunting past moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories of the Golden Age, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which forgotten icon would you like us to feature next? Or what other lost truths from vintage Hollywood do you think deserve to be told? Let us know, and until next time, stay curious.